This week's Parashat Acharei, starts off with reminding us of the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, Acharei Shnei Bnei Aaron, and then immediately switches to the halachot of the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, which has led Hazal to try to make some connections between, maybe we can understand what was the het of Nadav and Avihu, and how does it maybe relate to the continuation in our parasha. So if you open up the Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, this is Perek Kaf Siman Tet, so the Midrash over there gives different reasons, the rabbis over there give 4 different reasons that they felt that Nadav and Avihu might have sinned based on the psukim by us and by Shemini. Listen to my other Devar Torah that I just sent out about the Shtuya Yain, a different answer brought there. But in the Midrash, we have another opinion. It says, Abba Hanin Omer, Al Yedei Shelo Hayu Lahem Nashim. Do you want to know why they died? Because they weren't married. Tichtib, V'chiper ba'ado v'ad beito, beito zo ishto. The pasuk in our parasha, the beginning of the parasha, speaks about the laws of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur, and one of the rules over there is that he has to be married. And you have to have a beito. If he doesn't have a wife, the Kohen Gadol can't do his proper service. There are even halachot before Yom Kippur he would take a second wife, just in case. I mean, this is very important. The Kohen Gadol has to have a wife. So says the Midrash, that was the sin of Nadav and Avihu. They didn't have a wife. Now, this is interesting that in Perush Maharzu, on this Midrash, he writes, this might be a hint that maybe on that inauguration day, all the sons of Aharon maybe were on the level of a Kohen Gadol, because having a wife in that pasuk is Dafka Kohen Gadol halacha. But maybe you can say that they all had Shaya Lahem Din Kohanim Gedolim. They all had this kind of halacha. They were all on this very, very high level. So in a certain sense, Nadav and Avihu on this opening inauguration day were on the level of a Kohen Gadol. Maybe that's also why they thought they could do the Yom Kippur service. That's why they thought they could do all the stuff that they were doing, all the other opinions about what might have gone wrong with them, but they really felt they were on this high level. So the fact that they're being held to such high standards of halacha, says the Maharzu, says maybe they were on this high level. Okay, so I was wondering, why weren't they married? Like, what's the deal over here? We're going to see Chazal, we're going to read another Midrash in a second that's going to come down very harsh against them for not getting married. But I was thinking, okay, where do we have this idea? In Judaism, we're all about the marriage, we're all about the Ish and Isha. We're going to see in a second, there's Chazals, there's Zohars, the Shekhinah doesn't come down properly to the person, the Nevuah is not proper unless you're married. It's like, where did that come from? So I was wondering, maybe, just maybe, they might have seen this when they were watching what took place with Moshe and Tzipporah, because you have to realize that Moshe and Tzipporah had, according to Chazal, in the Midrashim, had separated. They'd either separated by Matan Torah, or maybe even earlier by the burning bush time already. But there's different Midrashim. But on the simple level, at least by Matan Torah, Moshe did not return to Tzipporah. And why did he not do that? Because he got to be in this. He wanted to be in he said, Hashem speaks to me. I have this nevuah that's like peh. God speaks to me mouth to mouth. So Moshe Rabbeinu was like, I have to be on this high level. I have to always be pure, mikvah, all these things. Therefore, I can't be married. And it says that Kadosh Baruch Hu agreed with him at the end of the day. It was Moshe Rabbeinu's idea, and Hashem was maskim. So we know about Nadav and Avihu that they always had this deep, deep desire to be so close to Kadosh Baruch Hu. So I was wondering, maybe they were learning that from Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, first off, there's a big difference between the two, because Moshe Rabbeinu was once married, had kids, and then there was a separation later on. It's not also so clear, was he divorced from Tzipporah, or did he just separate from her? Different languages in the Chazal might point in different directions over there. Also, we know this is the big question for his sister Miriam when we were speaking to Aharon, because she and Aharon didn't realize that it was a special dispensation for that Akadosh Baruch Hu gave to Moshe. But maybe Nadav and Avihu incorrectly thought they also were on that special level. That says the Midrash Tanchuma. This is Vayikra Perek Yud on our parasha. Says the Midrash Tanchuma. Abba Hanin Omer, says Abba Hanin. Shelo Hayu Lahem Nashim. You want to know why they died? They weren't married. The Tanin and Taman, because we learn over there, the Chiper ba'ado ube'ad beito he ishto, because you have to be married. Amar Rabbi Levi, shechutzim hayu harbe. Rabbi Levi gets harsher. He says there was a lot of arrogance over here. Vayu omrim, ezu isha genet lanu. They said, which woman is worthy for us? Harbe nashim agunot hayu yeshvot matilahem. And there actually were a lot of unmarried women. I just think they're called agunot over here. But these unmarried women, who they were supposed to be for them. These were holy, holy women that could have been perfect for Nadav and Avihu, and they were waiting and waiting. Behem omrim, but they said no. Ahi Avinu melech, our uncle is the king. Moshe Rabbeinu's king. Va'avinu kohen Gadol, and Aaron Kohen is the Kohen Gadol. Ahi Imenu Nasi, and our uncle Nachshon ben Aminadab is the Nasi of the tribe of Yehuda. The Anu Skanei Kehuna, and we are these deputy high priests. We saw in the Marzu on the other midrash that they even had a koach of a Kohen Gadol. Ezu isha genet lanu, and they said in arrogance, which woman is proper for us? Who fits us? Who's worthy to marry us? Amar Rabbi Menachma b'Shem of Yeshua bar Nehemiah Aleim Amar David, and about Nadav and Avihu we have a pasuk in Tehillim Perek Ayin Chet pasuk Samech Gimel says as follows: Bachurav achla ish. The Bachurim, the unmarried ones, they were devoured by fire. This is hinting to the death of Nadav and Avihu, who were swallowed up by the fire. Ubetulotav lohulalu, and the unmarried women, they didn't have the ability to sing. There was no nuptial song. I see the translation here. They couldn't have the song anymore. They couldn't get married. Lama Bachurav achla ish ayedei shebetulav lohulalu. Why did these Bachurim, why did these unmarried young men die? Why did the fire devour them? Ayedei, because they didn't marry. They didn't give the ability to the women to sing the beautiful songs under their chuppah, and that was the punishment, and that's why they died. Okay, that's the Midrash Tanchuma. So as I was trying to say, maybe we can say that they had learned this, they had thought this Hava Amina from Moshe Rabbeinu, who had separated from Tzipora. And Baruch Hashem kivanti, because I found a couple of Sfarim that kind of go in this direction, but they all explain that they made a mistake because Moshe was different than them. It's true that for Moshe to see Hashem panim al panim, to see face to face, to go deep into that Holy of Holies, he said he felt he couldn't be married, and Hashem accepted it. But Hashem accepted Moshe's argument, and until Hashem accepts the argument, it's not so clear if it was actually even allowed. To the point that Miriam spoke out against it. But once the Kadosh Baruch Hu accepts it, basically what it's saying is that Moshe has a very special halacha. And we actually mentioned last year in the Dvar Torah that the Zohar relates about the small aleph in Vayikra. One of the opinions in the Zohar says, why did Moshe have a small aleph? That small aleph hints to Hashem calling out to him, that Hashem receiving these deep connections to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's small and not big because in the end of the day, he wasn't married. In the end of the day, he had started off married. He had a certain zechut in the beginning, but once he divorced from Tzipora, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed that he was supposed to. And we had mentioned in the past that probably he had to divorce her because he was married now to the Jewish people. He was now part of the fixing of the egel, part of the bringing down the Torah, and all these different steps in Moshe Rabbeinu's life is always about giving up his own personal self for the sake of Am Yisrael. In a certain sense, he was like the mother who was helping the Jewish people, but he's also like the kala in a certain sense, in many actions, in many attributes, whether it's a kala to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or whether it's even to us, where his whole focus is fighting for the Jewish people, and that's why he couldn't be married at this exact point. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows it and says, okay, I agree with you, but there's still a small aleph because it wasn't 100%. And now we know that Nadav and Avihu, they also want to see Hashem panim al panim. They also want to go into that Holy of Holies. They want to get as close as possible. But they never got that special dispensation from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu never said that's okay. And that becomes the problem. Part of Chazal says that they were more halacha b'fnei Rabban. They did their own halacha without asking. There's a certain brazenness that they want to do what they think is correct, but it seems to be that here it was a little bit too far. So I saw in a sefer called Shishim Elef, the book is called 60,000. It's a book of Shishim, of 60 perushim, 60 interpretations of the small aleph in Vayikra. So it says Sefer Shishim Elef, this is in Ofen Lamed Zayin. He actually references a Megillah Mukot, on one of the Megillah Mukot's commentaries on the small aleph on Ofen Samech Aleph. So says the Magam Lakot that we know that the Yud and the K of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's names, Hashem's name, Yud K Vav K, the first two letters, the Yud and the K, the Yud and the letter Hey, those are the secret to a good marriage. Because we know there's a Gemara, says the Gemara in Sotah, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Darish Rabbi Akiva, teaches Rabbi Akiva. Now I was also thinking that Rabbi Akiva is the one that had that. He seems to have the big Aleph. He gets to the Sharnon in his lifetime. What does Rabbi Akiva get to these high levels and gets to keep it? We know he was married. He was married actually a bunch of times, but Rabbi Akiva is all about the marriage, all about the wife. And even though he's going to separate from his wife to go to the Beit Midrash, that's going to be a Ratzon of his wife. And actually I saw there's a tikkun for Tzipora in Rachel, in Rabbi Akiva's wife Rachel, by sending him back to the Beit Midrash, back to separate, but ultimately he comes back to his wife. So ultimately, Rabbi Akiva is the one teaching this halacha of marriage. He says, Ish ve'isha zahu, if Ish ve'isha, if the merit of a faithful marriage, what do you get from the Ish ve'isha? Shechina beinehem. They have the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rest between them. That's the reward for a faithful marriage. You have the Shekhinah between you. Lo zachu, and if they're not zoche, then what happens? Esh ochaltan. Then the fire is going to burn them. And everybody explains, how does that work out? It's based on the letters of their names. Because Ish ve'isha, it's almost the exact same name. They both have an aleph and a shin, but by the male, there's the yud. By the isha, there's the hey. The yud and the hey, that's God's name. The yud and the hey come into Ish ve'isha, and God is with them. But if you take out Hashem's name, if you remove it, says Rashi, chalak et shemo v'shchinato beinehem yud beish v'hei beisha, because Rashi tells us Hashem put the yud and the hey in their names, and therefore, if you aren't faithful, lo zachu esh ochaltan sheHaKadosh Baruch Hu mesalek shemo b'beinehem v'nimtzu esh ve'esh, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed the yud and the hey, and then we're only left with fire. We're only left with Ish. Now, interesting, the Gemara goes on to say, Udi Isha, Difa Medi Ish, which is better, which is worse. Rashi kind of learns that for women, they're going to get hurt stronger by the fire. But then I saw in Sefer Petach Einayim, he learns, no, that the woman is actually always on a higher level than the man, because between Ish and Isha, we have to have the Yud and the Hey. But in the name Isha, there's the E, the Chirik under the Aleph sounds like a Yud. It's kind of like a half Yud. So they actually said that in the word Isha is almost closer on her own to have the Yud and the Hey in there. But the Ish is totally far away because he has no connection to the Hey in the name Ish. But Isha is closer, but ultimately she doesn't have the full Yud. She only has a Chirik. So you have to come together to get that Yud and the Hey. But if you don't come together, what are you left with? You're left with Esh. Now, says the Megillah Makot, based on these on the Gemarot and the Midrashim, he says also at Matan Torah we had this level of erusin with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We had this level of engagement to Hashem, and then at the Mishkan there was this nisuin stage, this like marriage to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now we're thinking about Nadav and Avihu who want to get as close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. They want to be married, so to speak, to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Mishkan kind of symbolizes the chuppah, the marriage canopy, the home, the nisuin stage of the Chatan, the Kala. But ultimately, says the Megillah Makot, he closes based on a Zohar, and he says that when the pasuk says that Adam ki akriv mikem, that only an Adam is supposed to bring a korban. He says an Adam, a person is only merits the level of Adam when he has the level when he has a husband and wife, when he's married. That I guess you have an Ish, you have an Isha, but when they actually get married, that's the higher level of Adam. I guess Adam originally, we know, according to one of the approaches, was created both male and female and all that. I don't know, but I'm not sure exactly where this is coming from. But you have to have yourself an Adam. You have to be married to actually be doing the korban properly. And he says that by them not being married, that was part of their sin over here. Now I saw there's a big diyun amongst the poskim. Can a kohen bring korbanot if he's not married? It seems that he can't. It seems to be a little much more on that. But there is this level of Adam that I guess Nadav and Avihu thought they could reach even without being married. And says Megillah Makot, you can't. Okay, now back to the Shishim Elef. Back to this 60,000 who quoted that Megillah Makot. Says the Shishim Elef that if you remove the Yud and the K, if you remove the Ish and Isha, you don't have that marriage. So what do you have left? You have the Esh. He says that's why Nadav and Avihu were burnt. They are burnt with the Esh because they didn't have the Isha. And that's why the fire came out. It says Milifnei Hashem. The fire that burned them came from before Hashem. What is Lifnei Hashem? What is the Lifnei? So if you have 4 letters to Hashem's name, Yud, K, and Vav, K, the Lifnei, the earlier letters are the Yud and the K. And that's where they got burned from. A fire came out, Milifnei Hashem. Milifnei, meaning the first 2 letters, the Yud, K. There was a lacking over here of not being married. So that's why it's going to come out and burn them. Okay. But then he says, when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's different because Moshe Rabbeinu had a special dispensation from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was allowed to be separate from Tzipporah once Hashem allowed it. And again, it's a later stage in Moshe Rabbeinu's development. Okay, now, says Sefer Torah Shalom on Vayikra, he writes similarly, that only Moshe Rabbeinu had this special acceptance from Hashem, and he can continue serving God, he can continue even going, according to many opinions, into the Holy of Holies, even after he was separated from Tzipporah. But he says, why did Hashem choose to punish Nadav and Avihu on Inauguration Day, on the Chanukhat HaMizbeach? Now, we mentioned in the past, what day of the year was it? It was the second year, Aleph Nisan. It was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That was the inauguration day. He says, what is Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh is given over specifically to the women. We know that the women have that special connection. Rosh Chodesh is their holiday. We also know that the women had a special connection to the Mishkan. Because remember, according to Chazal, they didn't donate to the Egel. They didn't sin with the Egel, but rather, when did they donate their jewelry? While the men pulled off their jewelry for the Egel, the women threw their jewelry to build the Mishkan. So they were able to hold back by the Egel. They weren't part of that sin. And that's part of the reason also why Chazal tell us they were Zochet to Rosh Chodesh, because they didn't sin with the Egel. So they are now Zochet to Rosh Chodesh. That's their special holiday. They didn't sin with the Egel. They promoted the Mishkan, and now the inauguration day of the Mishkan takes place on Rosh Chodesh. And now with the Kitrug against Nadav and Avihu, because we mentioned that Tanchum, Nadav and Avihu said, "Oh, there's no women who are Ra'ui for us. We're the Skan Kohanim, our father, our uncle, our uncle, and our other uncle." And they keep talking about how great they are. But wait a second. Look at these women. Today we have a Mishkan. Why? This is the tikkun of the Egel. And who was the Zechut? The Zechut was the women. You know how holy these women were? What do you mean that you don't have anybody ra'ui for you? Look at these beautiful, beautiful women that are waiting, agunot. They're waiting for you just to marry them. And that's why when it says that we mentioned in the past that Aaron has to have 2 of his sons have to die for the sin of the Egel. So who are the 2 that were chosen? It's going to be Nadav and Avihu that were chosen because Rosh Chodesh and the Mishkan opened up a prosecution of Kitrug against Nadav and Avihu for not marrying those holy women, and therefore that was why they were chosen. That's why Hashem chose them to be killed on the inauguration day. Okay. I then saw a different cool idea in a sefer called Me'otzrotehem Shel Megidim. So he asked the question, I don't understand, why did they have to die? So they didn't get married, so that's worthy of death. But we learned in the Gemara about Ben Azai. There was the great Talmud Ben Azai, the great student of Rabbi Akiva, who he too never got married. But he said, I couldn't get married. He said he was honest. I couldn't, my desire to learn Torah, my desire to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was just too great. He says, what can I do? What can I do? And it seems to be that it was okay. Now, interestingly, side idea, there are other chazals that say that he had tried to get married. I saw Rabbi Khan's book, Crowns of the Letters, where he speaks about Ben Azai at length. It seems that there actually might have been an earlier attempt for marriage, as opposed to Nadav and Avihu, where we don't see any other attempt. But according to this sefer, Ben Azai, we know, is the famous one to not be married. And we don't see that he was punished. So he says, why are Nadav and Avihu punished for not getting married? So he quotes an idea from a sefer called Vayas Abraham, that there's another chazal for why Nadav and Avihu died. We mentioned there's so many reasons brought down in chazal, even though, from simple pasuk, according to Rabbi Khan, at least they didn't even sin. They were just trying to get too close to God. But he writes, according to this other midrash, they had said, when are these two zekenim going to die? When are Moshe and Aaron going to die so that we could take over? There was a certain haughtiness that they wanted to lead right now. We spoke about this a lot in the past. So says the Sefer Vayas Abraham, wait a second, you want to lead the tzibur? You know what kind of level of responsibility, you know what kind of tircha exists if you want to lead the tzibur? If you told us until now, why didn't you get married? Because you want to be so focused on Hashem, you want to learn Torah, be kedusha, be a little bit more, away from the world and just focus on holiness and holiness. It's like Ben Azai. Okay, maybe that we can understand. But if your agenda is to be a leader, a head of a tzibur, with all the tircha, with all the hardships that come with being a leader, that's not a Ben Azai sitting in the corner of a Beit Midrash quietly learning all the time. That's for a Ben Azai, there might be an exemption to not get married. But to be an actual head of a tzibur, to be a leader, that's what your desires are. No. For that you have to be married. Now you have to go with the bigger normal system for society. Okay. I then saw an idea in a sefer called Be'erot Mayim. He says, we know that Nadav and Avihu died by trying to get close to Hashem. And he compares that to the four rabbis who went up to the Pardes. Now, interestingly, the four rabbis that went up, Rabbi Akiva comes out Beshalom. He's the one that comes out and makes out okay. Ben Azai is in that story also. And that's when Ben Azai dies. So if we just said a second ago, Ben Azai is the one who never got married, we see Ben Azai hitzitz umet. Ben Azai looked a little bit too close and he died. So in the Sefer Be'erot Mayim, he connects that to our story of Nadav and Avihu. Now what did we just say? Ben Azai was never married. So the unmarried one who tries to look so much closer, tries to get a glimpse of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's already the second time Nadav and Avihu are metzitz, the second time they're trying to look where they're not supposed to be looking, or trying to get so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So maybe we're going to say, yeah, they tried to look, they tried to get too close. That's what our Midrash is saying, but they're not married. And ultimately Ben Azai also is going to die. You say, how can Ben Azai not get punished? It's not about getting punished. It's about when you get so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we're going back to Rabbi Khan's Divrei Torah. It's about when you want to get so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you're not married, you don't have that anchor holding you back. He says that might also be the pshat of when it says they weren't wearing the proper clothing. Another reason in Chazal, in this midrash by us, says they were lacking the me'il. They weren't wearing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Now, a lot of times the wife can be known as the garment in certain psukim, but here they didn't have the proper prep. You want to get to this high level of nevuah, this high level of closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to have the right basis. You have to have the right preparation, and part of that preparation is they have to be married. And in the Sefer Be'erot Mayim, he actually compares it to Moshe Rabbeinu in the Malon. When Moshe Rabbeinu was in that. He's on his way back to Egypt to save the Jewish people, and he's hanging out in that inn along the way. All of a sudden, this angel that was in the shape of like a snake came and tried to kill him. And he argues what was going on over there. So he wants to explain. We know the whole story is the Brit Milah wasn't done. He was too busy focusing on going to see the Jewish people, focusing on the day-to-day over there in the inn, whatever the issue was with Moshe Rabbeinu over there. This Sefer writes, Moshe Rabbeinu at this point was reaching great levels of nevuah. He just saw Kadosh Baruch Hu by the burning bush, and it was getting a little bit too high for him if he wasn't going to be prepared properly. And in this case, there was something lacking. He wouldn't be able to lead Beshalom. He was getting too close to holiness, to Kadosh Baruch Hu, to kedusha, but he was lacking. And what was he lacking? In this case, there was a lacking of a Brit Milah, a simple pshat that his son didn't have a Brit Milah, and he was lacking a Brit Shalom, and therefore his wife Tzipporah is the one that saves the day and makes the necessary preparations for Moshe Rabbeinu. She's the one that does the Brit Milah on their son, and now he doesn't die from that angelic snake attack. So Lanyut Dati, I think it's also hinting here as well. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu was getting these great levels of nevuah, and who saves him? his wife. But Nadav and Avihu, they don't have the wife to save them. Right now, when they want to get close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, they want to be speaking to Hashem, panim el panim, they can't make it because they don't have the wife to protect them. Okay, I saw another idea. This is in the Darash Moshe, not Rav Moshe Feinstein. This is Darash Moshe of Rav Moshe Pinto. He writes that why did Hashem speak to Yaakov Avinu in a dream by the ladder? We see these other visions that seem to be much deeper and bigger connections to HaKadosh Baruch Hu more directly. How come by Yaakov Avinu did the image come in a chalom, in a dream? So he writes, Hashem couldn't speak to Yaakov more directly because at that point, by the ladder, he wasn't married yet, and it would have been way too dangerous. Now, interestingly, I saw a similar idea relating to Yitzchak and the Akedah story in Sefer Minchat Asher from Asher Weiss. He writes, how come Sarah Imeinu died? So according to one of the approaches in the Midrash, remember in the past we gave like 3 approaches of what did she die about? Did she think Yitzchak actually died? Did she know he died? But there's one approach that she was upset because when she heard that he had almost died, Kimat shelo nishchat, he had almost been nishchat, he had almost been slaughtered, but then he wasn't slaughtered, and she died at like that point. Now, what does that mean? That should be a reason not to die. So, a simple interpretation is it was just so much emotional and so difficult that he almost died, that got to her too. Or that the suffering of the world is so great that was too much for the mother, for the Mama Rachel, for the Mama Sarah, for the Jewish people. It would be too much for the mother to handle that level of pain. We spoke in the past about Elisheba, Bat Nadav, that she's also crying at the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, that for the mother, as opposed to Avraham, who could hold back his tears, and by Yidom Aharon, by the Ima, it's a very different kind of feeling. But says the Minchat Asher, says Asher Weiss, a little bit different. He says, what do you mean Kimat Shelo Nishchat? That he had almost died. But she says, but wait a second, why didn't he die? Wasn't my Yitzchak such a holy level? Didn't he prepare himself enough that he could have just gone up to Kadosh Baruch Hu? Isn't he like the Pardes story when Ben Azai got so close? What happens? The neshama gets taken up. When Nadav and Avihu get so close, their neshama gets taken up. And that's what was bothering Sarah. But at the same time, says the Minchat Asher, we also see from Rabbi Akiva that Rabbi Akiva could go up, see those high levels, and he can also leave Beshalom. So there is that high level. I guess that Yitzchak, we've also compared Yitzchak to Rabbi Akiva in the past, that they can see the future, they live in the future, they live in the times of Mashiach. The Akedah, Yitzchak is like the living Korban, he's going to be laughing in the future, he's the Yitzchak, Rabbi Akiva is the Metzachek. So maybe we have also this kind of connection over here, that Yitzchak is at Rabbi Akiva levels, they could see this great level and still survive. Okay, fine. But now, if we mentioned that Moshe Rabbeinu, we had that snake story by the Malon, so I saw one last idea that connects the snake story of Moshe a little bit to our story, because our story also seems to have a snake attack. Because why? Because the rabbi teaches as follows: "Vatetzeh esh lifnei Adonai." This fire came out from God, but tochalotam, and it devoured Nadav and Avihu. That's how they died. So the rabbis explain: "Shayu shnei chutin shel esh yotzin mibeit kodesh hakodashim, kodshei hakodashim." That two chutim, two little strings, two little chutim of fire came out from the Kodesh HaKodashim. Now notice where it's coming from. It's coming from the Holy of Holies, and it went out lechot mehem shel Nadav and Avihu, and it went through their nostrils v'sarafum, and it burned them. And that's what the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Nun Bet Amud Aleph says. But we have another Gemara, and the Chazal related to this other Gemara says the Gemara in Eruvin Samach Gimel Amud Bet, Lo metu bnei Aharon ela al sharu halacha bifnei Moshe Rabam. Why did they die? Because they taught halacha. We mentioned they taught halacha. They're supposed to bring the fire down below. They taught halacha before asking Moshe, the rabbi. And if you teach a halacha, you do a halacha without asking, it's not proper kavod. And that's chayav mita. Because why? Because anybody who teaches a halacha b'fnei rabo, the punishment is death by being bit by a snake. So that's what, and they want to relate the two. They want to relate the two, that this death by the fire is like being bit by a snake. Okay, because I guess imagery, you have these like chutim, you have like these little strings of fire, kind of look like snakes. They're going through the nose, attacking them over here. We know that when the snake got us to sin by the Etz Hadat, ultimately our punishment is going to be v'za'at hapecha. We're going to have the sweat of our nose over here. So we have this concept of the nose and the snake. But in Tiferet Yonatan, Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz, he makes the connection so much stronger, because says Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz, he writes this in the Tiferet Yonatan. Also, you can find it in the Yarot Devash. He says, why? So we just said, based on our Gemara, that if a person is moreh halacha b'fnei rabo, if a person teaches a halacha in front of the rabbi without asking, then the punishment is the ra'ui nachash lachisho. It's proper for the snake to bite them. Ela shelo hayu nachashim etzoyim sham. But we had a problem. There were no snakes in the desert. Why was there no snakes? So he brings down a midrash in Shir Shirim Rabbah. This is Perek Gimel Siman Bet. Sheshnei chutei esh yatzu mikodesh hakodashim. The midrash there says that two chutei esh, again we have our strings of fire, came out of the Holy of Holies. V'sarfu et nechashim b'midbar. And they had gotten rid of all the nechashim. We spoke about the clouds of glory protecting us from the scorpions and the snakes. This midrash says that all the snakes in the midbar were killed by the two chutim of esh that came out of the Holy of Holies. He says, therefore, chutei esh shahagu et nechashim ba'u b'mkomam v'hargu Nadav and Avihu. Unbelievable. This is the bekiut of Eibshitz. Since the two strings of fire had killed all of the snakes in the desert, so there was no snakes left to kill Nadav and Avihu who were deserving of the punishment of being killed by snakes. So therefore, what replaces the snakes? Those same two strings of fire that had killed the snakes are now going to come from that Kodesh HaKodashim and kill Nadav and Avihu from that same exact makom. Shabbat Shalom. To add a little addendum to this very last part about the fire coming forward. So actually I found the Midrash. It's in Shir Shirim Rabbah. It's also found in Devarim Rabbah. Where here, interestingly enough, it mentions that the fire itself came from the Ketoret. And what part of the Ketoret? The Ketoret that was placed Beina Badim of the Aron, meaning it's coming from the middle of the Aron. So this actually goes very well according to the opinions we've said in previous years from the Shvilei Pinchas, from Rabbi Khan. They're going Lifnei Hashem. They're going all the way according to the opinion. They're going into the Holy of Holies, but now they're going all the way up to the Aron. We said in the past, the Aron is Or Nun. It's that light of the Nun, because this concept that they were trying to get so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the koch of the fire from the Ketoret. So interestingly, just a little nuance that it's coming from the Ketoret itself, from in the Holy of Holies. Okay, another addendum to add. If we go back to Yitzchak for a second. So first up, it was interesting. So Yitzchak Sarah was upset according to this approach that he hadn't reached this great level, but that might also explain what's the very next thing that happens after the story. Abraham marries Sarah, and he wants to go find a wife for Yitzchak. If Yitzchak was mitzitz by the Akedah, and he didn't get as close as maybe he could have, maybe it's because he wasn't married. So now Abraham is running to go find him Rivka, go find him a wife. Right now he has to get to that level. And there actually are mystical teachings that do say that Yitzchak at the Akedah was mitzitz, looked a little bit too far, and that's why his eyes got dim, like midah keneged midah. He looked too much, and then he got nifga. So lanutati, maybe we can say that Yitzchak corresponds to the Ben Zoma character in the four that went up to the Pardes. Because when they went up to the Pardes, so we say that Ben Azai, he's the unmarried one who's too young. He's like the Nadav and Avihu, he dies. But Ben Zoma, which also there's ideas over there that maybe he might have been unmarried there as well. Ben Zoma looks and he's nifga. And what do we have by Yitzchak? Yitzchak is also nifga. In the past, we sent out a Dvar Torah that tried to relate to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Rabbi Akiva. We brought Korach in, we brought Miriam, Ma'im, everyone hitting the rock. We have different ideas that we brought in. But it could be that the Yitzchak character already by the Avot might actually correspond in a certain aspect to Ben Zoma as well. So 2 out of the 4 characters of the Pardes have earlier sources in our Chumash. Shabbat Shalom.